What's up, y'all? Have you ever met somebody in your life, in your travels, in your work, where you just thought, man, I need to pay attention to what this person is doing, because they're doing it right. Well, that is exactly how I feel about today's guest. Her name is Kristin Marvin. The conversations that we have in this episode are just awesome. They make me so happy and proud to be doing what I'm doing. So, um, it was cool, and I can't wait for you to see it. So, here we go. You're listening to the Culinary Mechanic Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Zaturka, the founder of Culinary Mechanic, a restaurant advisory firm focused on making kitchens and restaurants run like well-oiled machines. With this podcast, we aim to bring you insights, strategies, tools, and tactics, and sometimes just good old advice and stories that are going to help you run your restaurant better. I hope you dig it, because honestly, it's a real labor of love. One thing you could do that would help me a whole lot is to go anywhere that you listen to podcasts and leave a 5-star review. That'll help get the word out so that more people will hear this podcast, and hopefully we can help more restaurants run just a little better. Now please, enjoy the show. Today I am joined by Kristin Marvin, who runs Solutions by Christin, a restaurant consulting firm. Kristin, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Simon. It's a pleasure.
I am so excited to have you join me today, because you and I have had some great conversations over the last year, and I think that this is a great thing to be able to share what you bring to the world, to a few more people.
Thanks. Yeah, this is so special. We were talking about it before, but you and I have the same birthday. We started our businesses around the same time. We were kind of growing up together. Found each other on LinkedIn, and it's nice to build community with you and check in and just have somebody to go, what's going on? Where are you at? I'm in the same place. Are you in the same place? What's going on? What does this look like? So it's been an absolute pleasure. So.
Well, in the spirit of the Culinary Mechanic Podcast, we like to say we're just going to press on the gas, and I'm going to ask you the first question by saying, how'd you get into this industry? How did you find yourself here?
Yeah, thank you. I started cooking when I was 15. I'm from a little town called St. Joseph, Missouri, and there's a family-owned Mexican restaurant there that's still in operation today. And for me, like, I just wanted to get a job and wanted to get out of the house as quick as I could. But I went and applied there, and they made me a line cook, and I grew up really, really shy. So sticking me in the corner, flipping enchiladas on a flat top was like perfect for me. I didn't have to talk to anybody. It was great. And so I did that for a little bit. And then I tried the retail thing in high school, and I hated it. It was super boring. I did not want to fold sweaters. I did not want to pierce ears. I went back into the restaurant industry when I moved to Colorado after graduating high school. And I got my first job at Outback when Outback was cool. I'm dating myself in 1999 when the flare was cool and the shirts were loud and bright and colorful, and it was just a total party vibe. And I started serving.
Flair's still cool, let's be honest.
Totally. But I started serving there, and then they gave me an opportunity to bartend. And my first night of bartending, we were located we were the busiest Outback in Colorado Springs, and we were located right next door to the World Arena. And there was a Matchbox 20, again, dating myself. There was a Matchbox 20 concert that night, and they put me in the well, and I got my ass handed to me for 2 hours straight. Yeah. And by the end of it, I was covered in like Wallaby darn, peach schnapps, like beer, sticky shit. It was just amazing. And I looked up and just took a look around once everybody left, and the whole place was just in total like disarray. And I was like, I don't know what that was, but I'm hooked. And I want it forever. So that was really like,
I gotta say, you just said it was a mess and it was amazing. Yeah. That is exactly what I want to hear today. Perfect.
Yeah, it was great. And so, I was going to college at the time for marketing, and I left Outback and I got a job at the Broadmoor, which was a 5-star, 5-diamond resort. And at the time, and was able to get into the hotel at a time when they were opening a brand new concept. And I graduated from college and I went to my food and beverage director and I just said, I love what I'm doing and I want to move up the ranks. So what do I do? How do I do it? And he said, take our course, and he said, we're opening this fine dining restaurant and we've hired mixologists out of New York and we have a wine program where you can study to become a sommelier. And we'd hired a GM who used to work for Danny Meyer at Union Square Cafe. And I was a huge Danny and am still a Danny Meyer fan. We'd hired Jacques Pepin's son-in-law to be the chef. All the things. I was like, I've got to be a part of all of this. And that really, for me, I mean, I had just an incredible boss, incredible mentor, learned so much about food and wine and mixology. And at that point, I was 24 and I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And that just led me to becoming a managing partner, opening concept after concept, just falling in love with the business. And yeah, I still want to be a part of it forever. So that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Were there any moments where you looked around and you're like, I could go over there and do something else, or you were just hooked in?
Well, I think, I spent 5 years at the hotel and, I'd had a couple hiccups in my career that I now look back and find the opportunities in. But when I was at the hotel, I was an AGM and my GM left. And again, I was 24, 25 years old. I thought I was kicking ass. I knew I was doing a good job. And my GM had said, you know what, like, I'm going to really put your name in the hat to take the promotion here and get the job. And I didn't get it. And I was pissed. And they brought in somebody from Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. And I was like, fuck this. This person from a chain restaurant is going to ruin everything special that we've just built. And I went home and my husband was selling wine at the time. And I said, can you apply and transfer to Denver? I want to move. And he said, yeah. And an opportunity was open territory in Denver, downtown and in Cherry Creek, which is like a higher end part of town with amazing restaurants. And I think timing is everything. And we moved to Denver and it was great. And then I was I became a managing partner with a local husband and wife chef team that had 2 concepts and we expanded to 7 in 5 years. And after 5 years time, I kind of looked around and I was like, I don't know, I'm not happy here anymore.
Right.
And I don't think partnership means the same thing to me as it means to everybody else. So I'm out. So I jumped on with a local brunch concept that had 6 locations. And 2 weeks after I got hired, the owners took me to lunch and said, we've sold the company, we're going national. And I went, fuck, what did I just do? And then I immediately woke up the next day and said, I'm all in. Let's do this. This concept is amazing. There are lines out the door for hours at a time. And in 7 years, we went from 6 to 48 locations. And it was incredible. I learned a ton. I'm a total expert in change management, rolling out new systems, and loved the opportunity of growth and development. But I realized after 7 years, leadership development wasn't all about KPIs. Right. And I was incredibly unhappy doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I was really unhappy and I drank pretty heavily and I got myself to a point of burnout.
Yeah.
And, and it sucked because I loved the industry, but I had really lost my way and I wasn't slowing down to take a look around at what I needed to do and what my next step was. And I wasn't taking care of myself physically or mentally. And I knew that I needed to change that. And that's when I started working with a coach. And that saved my life and changed my life.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I heard some similar, no surprise here, but I heard some similarities to my own story. Cause like at the moments where I go, God, I'm not happy. For me, I would look around and look outside the industry and go, should I get out now or should I do something else? And then within like 2 months, I would find myself doubling down and going harder than ever. Like harder than, I mean, just how I ever found the next gear or the next level of difficulty. But I would do that. And that would last 5 or 6 years. And you just grind through it. My last one was like 9 years where I just went. And then one day I went, oh, no. This is like, I've created or they've created or we have created something that I can't run this fast, this hard, and do all these things at this level. Well, I can, but I don't have the desire. Like for me, the big word there is fun. I stopped having fun,
Mhm.
and so I totally understand what you're saying. It's like, huh, okay,
Yeah.
maybe it's time to stop.
Well, it's
All
funny.
right.
I think a lot of us in the industry, we have that similar conversation with ourselves, right? Every 2 years, every 5 years. I did the same thing. Every 5 years, I was like, okay, I put in my time. I'm going to get out now. We talk about it like it's breaking out of jail, right? Like there's, I knew it was a career, but I think it's such a grind. It's so hard. And for me, when I thought about leaving the industry, I didn't even know where to start. I was like, I never want to work 8 to 5. I never want to work in an office job. And the thing that brought me back over and over and over again was just, I think the excitement of the industry. I loved my teams.
Mhm.
I loved being surrounded by food and beverage and making people's days amazing and making an impact in the community and just the instant gratification you got from welcoming people into your home, giving them a great experience, constantly having a new challenge every single day to work on. I I couldn't imagine, like, the hard work has never scared me, and especially being an entrepreneur, right? Like
Yeah.
the restaurant business totally set me up for this. I can accomplish an extraordinary, as you too can, right? Like an extraordinary amount of things before noon every day. Um, but yeah, nothing else sounded interesting to me. And granted, I just didn't know. I didn't know what was out there
Yeah.
besides the restaurant industry. And some of the concepts I worked for really made it sound like that was the best there was, and
Well,
you were
that's a
never going to
job,
find
right? That's
anything
how they
better.
keep you hooked in.
Totally brainwash you. Yeah.
Yeah. I worked for two brothers for 9 years, and to hear them talk, they were the top of the iceberg.
Yeah.
They still believe that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and um, I am thankful for the experiences I had with them, but
Hmm.
I am so happy to be out of that grind.
Yeah.
I think for me, you talk about like a lot of the welcoming guests. For me, it was teaching folks how to get to the next level. Like it was like there was nothing better than teaching a dishwasher to be a prep
Yeah.
cook to be a line cook, and a line cook to like supervise people and then keep going, right? Like teaching a sous chef how to like delegate and pull away and then monitor and coach and like then making them like okay, let's go upstairs into the office and like let's teach you how to do some stuff so that you can help your boss a little
Yeah.
bit. Oh no, I'm not ready for that. Oh yes, you are. And just that for me it was like no, we just keep developing and
Yeah.
farming the talent. That was always the fun for me.
100%. And don't you, I mean, just didn't you love those moments of insight? We get to do this now in our new roles as coaches, right? But teaching somebody something and then seeing that moment of insight where they get it and then they start leaning in and they're engaged and they take it and run with it. I mean, that's the best feeling in the world, right?
Are you feeling overwhelmed by the grind of running your kitchen? Imagine kitchen's humming along, people are on task, and you have the time to be creative and still make it home to see your family. Well, Culinary Mechanic is here with the strategies, tools, and tactics to help you be the leader everybody wants to work with. If you'd like to find out more about how Culinary Mechanic can help you run your restaurant like a well-oiled machine, I invite you to use the link in the show notes to book a 30-minute free consultation call. Yeah. I mean, there would be days for me where I would teach somebody about like leveraging their influence and like here teach this person how to do this and then they can do that for you, and then I'd go to the other restaurants and I'd come back and they'd look at me and go, so I taught this guy to do this and I taught that guy to do that, and now I don't have to do anything to open anymore. I can do this and I always get to my line check now. And I was like, oh, look at you. It's like the
That's awesome.
aha is just that is gold,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. They
Um,
have to do it though. They have to do it. They have to feel it. Yeah. Reap the benefits. That's
and they
awesome.
don't they're never going to do it till they're ready. And like, I think the biggest aha for me was, hey man, I need you to manage more and do less. Yes, chef. Come back 3 days later. Come on, man. I need you to manage more and do less. Yes, chef. No problem. Anything you want. And I had one guy, and it was like that for about 3 weeks. And I mean, shame on me for letting it take that long, but whatever. Uh, and then I said to him, I've told you need to manage more. Do you know what that means? He said,
Yeah.
no, chef, I don't.
Yeah.
And I was like, why the fuck didn't you say so?
Totally. Totally.
And so, like I was like, okay. I said, follow me. And we sat down at a table in the dining room in the middle of the day, and I had a blank sheet of paper. And I said, this is management. Are you ready? And he said, sure. I said, set expectations. Do you know what that means? Yes, I do. Okay, cool. I said, and here's the hard part. Follow up, follow up, follow up. There. That's management. He's like, what do you mean? That's it? That's it. I said, no,
Start
there's
there.
flesh to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's lots of like flowchart action. There's a little yes or a no, but the essence is set an expectation,
Yeah.
follow up. If it's not right, follow up again. If it is right, follow up again and just make sure it's set,
Right.
and if it's not, teach it again, and if they really don't get it after that, then maybe there's a different conversation. But
Yeah.
if
That's
you do, 3 follow-ups on an expectation, you should probably be there,
yeah.
and when I would teach it like that, they went, oh,
I
I
love
can
it.
do that.
Well,
I'm like, yes, you can.
it's it's so funny. I'm going to write about this week, and this topic, it's funny just how you get into conversation with somebody, and I'm like, I've been talking about this all week. The concept of expectations. In this day and age, there is a calling to and responsibility by restaurant owners and managers and leaders to set expectations like they've never set them before. I was talking to a client this morning, and she was frustrated because there's a lack of response time when it comes to the team reaching out about community events. And they bring in really big event business. And she was like, the guest is so important. This is, and it wasn't even from the revenue side. It was just like the relationship side, like the hospitality side, the experience side. And I said, what is your expectation for how long it should take your team to respond to a guest? And she said, well, I think it's this. And I said, no, what's the expectation for your staff? How long is it? We had to get to that point. I was like, is it 24 to 48 hours? Is it 24 to 72 hours? What is it? What does that look like? And I just said the way that you feel and the level of importance to you may be completely different to them, and if you think 5 or 6 days is too long, like just remember 5 or 6 days for you is so different, feels so different than an owner or than a manager and leader being on the floor, being in shifts when they're managing a million things. Like you've got to set those really clear expectations. Like you said, follow up 3 times. Okay, the third time it's good, we're good to go, right? Like we've got to be so clear right now about what success looks like because there's so many people coming into the industry that have never been in it before and they just don't understand what it takes to do the job.
Yep. Last year I was coaching a chef, and I had limited. I would check in with the owner of the restaurant. It was a single operation, and she calls me one day and she goes, "I know that I've hired you to talk to my chef, and that's great." She says, "Can you find an hour for me?" I'm like, "Whatever you want." Sure. She goes, "How about tomorrow?" I said, "Great, I'll be there." And so I went over and I knocked on her door, and she says, "Come on in, sit down." I sat down, and she goes, "I need your help." And I said, "Okay, well, how can I be of assistance?" She goes, "I feel like I'm the mother. I'm the owner of this restaurant, and I have 3 managers." And she says, "Admittedly, I don't really have a general manager, and my managers have said that they don't necessarily want to bring in a general manager, and they're willing to do it, but I'm not getting what I want." I
Mhm.
said, "Okay. Have you told them what you want?" "Well, I tell them every day." I'm like, "No." I said, "Honestly, sit them down and introduce them to Jesus. You, like, sit them down and tell them with a good long list or a short list or whatever you want. Tell them what you want, because here's a like a mind-blowing thing. People don't read minds. They just don't read minds. They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know what you want. So tell them. And she's like, oh, okay. I'm so tired. I really feel I'm burnt out on this, on owning this restaurant. I'm like, how long have you owned this restaurant? I said, she says, 17 years. Great. Pull your people together. Tell them what you need.
Yeah.
So she hemmed and she hawed and she waited almost 6 weeks. And finally, about 2 months later, I was just, I checked in with her every couple of weeks, like, hey, but usually send her an email to tell her how the chef was doing, and that was great. And I went in person to check in and say hi, and I said, how you doing? She's like, I'm really refreshed. I said, yeah. I said, why is that? She goes, I finally did that meeting you told me. I said, how long ago? She said, 2 weeks. I said, 2 weeks. Okay. And tell me what's going on. She's like, people are doing exactly as I've asked them to. I stopped walking in, finding things that drive me crazy. I'm like, hey, awesome. I said, what about that sort of lack of initiative thing you were talking about? She's like, well, I told them either they figure out what they needed to do to get things done, or I was gonna bring somebody in that was gonna tell them what to do, and they would all lose money because some of them are like regular employees that pull one shift a week as a manager. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how you get that to go to work, but okay. And
Yeah.
and she says, but now they're doing what I've asked. And I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like people just don't read minds.
No, they don't. And it's so common when you have been doing something and you've got muscle memory around it, you've been doing it for so long. It's so hard, especially with employee turnover, to remember that you have to start from square one every single time somebody comes in. And it's so exhausting right now because turnover is it's so out of control, especially in the independent world. I just had a similar conversation yesterday with somebody who's owned a restaurant for 17 years, had the same management team in place for 6 or 7 years, and they've turned over their management team twice in a year. And he's like, this is just exhausting. That's why I'm such a fan of systems, because even it's something as small as an opening and closing checklist during the
Yeah,
day, you don't have to remember to make sure that you're regurgitating every single thing step by step by step, right? You can walk somebody through it, show it to them, hand it over to them, and then double check the work, right? And they've got a tool and a resource to lean on, so it's not all about you. And those systems just make those managers feel supported when you're not in the room, which is huge,
yeah,
right? Helps everything be more efficient, so their learning curve is a lot it's a lot less steep than it needs to be. And
yeah,
that impacts every single aspect of your operations, right? From your recipes, how your food looks, the presentation, your teamwork, the hospitality you're offering, the vibe, the other teammates, everything, right? Like, I'm such a fan of systems because it is just
absolutely.
it's the clearest form of setting expectations for people.
Absolutely. And ambiguity just goes away.
Yeah.
Right. It's start my favorite is the owner. You had an owner. Let's see, I had this one last year as well. You got an owner and he's got 4 restaurants, and for the most part they're pretty consistent. Amazingly, they had no written recipes, they had no portioning tools, and I was like, how on earth do you operate? He's like, oh, I just tell them. I'm like, great, doesn't it exhaust you? He's like, yeah, it does. you know and then there would be the, like, you go in and like, why is that portion so much bigger in this restaurant? Oh, well, the owner came in and he said blah 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 blah, and I was like, man, we got to get rid of that. And so
100%.
we got all the recipes printed, and I sat him down with his director of operations and I said, okay, the two of you, I need this habit. To be if you want to get out of this cycle, you have to stop what you're doing, some of the things you're doing. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, I never want to hear, oh, the owner said, or the director of operations said. I'm like, no, what does the recipe say? And
Yeah.
you two
Yep.
need to agree. And if you want to change the recipe, fucking change the recipe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. But change the recipe, communicate it out, roll it out and act like the 4-unit chain that you are, and you're not mom and pop anymore.
Yeah.
Four
Yeah.
restaurants, and it's gyros and shawarma, right? So
Yeah.
not that expensive.
Yeah.
$10 million in 4 restaurants. It was amazing.
Mhm.
But I'm like, you guys are big time, whether you think you are or not.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of full service restaurants that would kill to pull 2.5 million in a year.
100%. It's so funny. You're just taking me back to like a really cringe-worthy moment when I was a multi-unit regional man, and I'd walk in and same thing. Somebody would say, well, the owner wants it done like this. I'm like, yeah, we're going to stop saying that. What's the standard of the business, right? Where is the standard? Let's go back to the training materials. Where's the system, whatever. But B, I'm like, and I would really stress this with the managers. I'm like, every time you point to somebody else, you take away your authority and your power. You're a leader. You've been hired to manage. And so again, like leadership's role and ownership's role should be to provide those tools and resources for those teams so that the team, when they have a question, they've got something to point to again, right? And instead of having to call the owner going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then the owner's like, I'm burnt out. It's like, well, this is why, right? So yeah, that used to make me cringe.
Yeah, totally. Still does.
Yep.
Every time I hear it, I'm just like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, 100%.
I think one of my favorite ways to get it through people's heads is you're a manager. Your job, your purpose in the world now is to be the guardian of this business.
Mm.
Do you really think that's the best way?
Yeah.
And when they would say yes, I'm like, well, okay, now I got ammunition. I'm going to a lot of ways to sort of disprove that. But like,
Yeah.
I would like, if it was your operation, would you want it to be ambiguous, or would you want it to be like, do you want them to call you every time?
Mhm.
And they're like, no. I'm like, cool. Then you're the guardian of the business. You're being empowered to do this.
Yeah.
You're also empowered to make great decisions.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, the verbiage is just so important, right? When it comes into play, like, what are you saying? How are you talking about the business? What are you saying in front of the staff? What are you talking about in front of the customers, right? It's so important to the culture and how you execute and how you show up.
I got a question for you. This is one that's been kind of in the back of my mind. I feel like and I know that it happens in the front of the house, but for the back of the house, a lot of the chefs that I deal with, I get the like, I'm a little tired of working so much, or I don't know any other way to do it. And I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, how do I like, does this happen as much in the front of the house? Because chefs that work 75 hours a week, they're actually getting tired. Like some of the guys I know, guys and gals that I know, they're like, yeah, I can't do this forever. I'm like, no, you can't. So, how are you dealing with that?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because there's always been, in my opinion, so many differences between the front and the heart of the house when it comes to work-life balance, right? And chefs are, and those team, they're on stations, they're in a very small environments. Usually it's pretty hot. Usually the lighting's shit. Yes, they've got their music that they can crank up, which is exciting, right? But the ambiance isn't built for their experience, right?
Right.
And I've worked in some tiny ass kitchens and have done $90,000 a week in sales in 8-hour meal periods. I mean, just an incredible volume in 1,000 square foot kitchen, where you've got 13 people packed in there with horrible ventilation, HVAC, and it's steamy, and the dishwasher is just steaming up the whole place, right? And everybody's dying. The front of the house, though, there's so much thought that is put into the ambiance, the lighting, right? Depending on how much money you've got to spend, right? There's patio, there's fresh air. You can step outside for a second and catch your breath and take a look at things from the customer perspective and walk back in, right? You can make adjustments where needed. And in my experience, chefs are usually on the line because turnover has always been much higher in the heart than it has been in the front.
Right.
So chefs are working more on stations and in position than restaurant managers are. And I know a lot of restaurant managers now in the front are working positions more than they ever have had to before.
Yeah.
But it's a different role, right? Like restaurant managers, if they're staffed appropriately, they're able to manage their pivot points, constantly walk around. They're getting immediate guest feedback. which is usually positive depending on how the shifts are going, right? Which fills their bucket and their cup, right? The kitchen doesn't get that. So the energy levels are just completely different. The jobs are completely different. Front of house managers can take more breaks. Like the job is a lot less physical than it is in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
But there's also, from a mental stimulation point, front of house has a lot more things to manage, I think, when it comes to 130 guests in a space, right? And your
Yep.
bar and your host stand and being on a wait and cleanliness of the tables and cleanliness of the floor, the cleanliness of the bathrooms, right? You've got to try to be everywhere in a much larger space. And so that component of it can be really exhausting. But I think it depends on so much of the culture in your space, the level of training that you're providing your staff, how you're hiring, who you're hiring, and the design of the space really speaks largely to that. But yeah, I think managers that don't have very clear expectations and have shitty training, yeah, they burn out quick. Again, I talked to somebody yesterday. Yeah, they just said, I'm just putting people in. It just breaks my heart. But he said, I'm just putting people in place as managers because they're in the building and I can't find anybody else.
Oh.
And it's just, that's not a solution. It is a very quick way to put a Band-Aid on a wound that is never going to heal.
Yeah. I've seen a ton of that over the years in the sous chef ranks,
Mm-hmm.
right? The sous chef is usually the one who is willing to grind, is willing to like take the salary and, like, oh, okay. And some of them, they think that it's, oh, this is great. And others are like, oh, this is awful. I mean, I've been talking to a couple chefs recently and I said, if you're working too much, then I think you need to start to be as intentional about exiting as you are about entering. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, I want you at the beginning of hour one to start to think about what it means for you to leave on time. If that's 10 hours, right? What do you have to get done? And like get those things done early.
Mm-hmm.
And if you what do you mean? I'm like, if you are trying to leave at 7 in the evening, right? You're gonna pass off service to your sous chef, great. Then get things done early, right? Make choices that are intentional, that drive you towards the door. I said, because I can tell you from experience that if you don't, you get to hour 10 and you go, oh, I still have a lot of work to do. Right. And so I think that as intentional as, and so I think that crosses all the lines. I think if we begin to teach people to be as intentional about the way they are going to exit as the way they get in, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we teach people to have prep lists and have lists and other lists. Well, great. Have a list of all the things you got to get done. And if you can't get it done, then are you delegating enough?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Are you
100%.
teaching enough?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Totally.
I talked to one guy over the winter, and he's like, we're gonna open up 7 days. We've never opened up 7 days. And I said, well, if you're gonna open up 7 days and you're accustomed to being open 6 or 5, and you still want to take a day off, which I assume you do. And he said, yeah. I said, then you need to make a list of all the things that need to get done when you're not there. And then you need to figure out who's gonna do them, and then you need to teach them. And I was like, can you do that? He's like, yeah, that was really easy though. I said, yeah, it's not, I mean, we're not building rockets, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not building rockets, but you got to be clear about what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 100%. And the days of writing a schedule of like 2 to close, right? 4 to close. What does that, what does close mean, right? Some
No.
days it's 10, some days it's midnight, sometimes it's 1. There's no clear expectation or standard there of how long does it take to close. And I agree with you. Like I was writing about this in my book recently, sous chef, just thinking about it, like I had such a hard time with sous chef turnover in my really high volume days. And I just, we were paying $35,000 to $40,000 a year. And these sous chefs were working 70, 80 hours a week. And because of our labor model, they had to be in position 4 days a week. But we needed them to get up to speed on all the systems, and teach them the theories behind inventory and cost controls and COGS, right? All the things that and that shit takes time. And it takes distraction-free space and enough time to teach them how to be tech savvy and how to slow down their brain and really understand the concepts, and then build habits around how quickly they can and efficiently they can execute those systems. And when it got to that point, for a lot of them, they were like, I don't fucking want this. And we would explain what the job was, but they didn't understand or feel like what it actually was like to sit down and focus and go through inventory numbers every single week and rack your brain and figure out how many fucking avocados you lost and try to find those and then coach the team on it, right? Like all the things that it takes.
Well, yeah, they're too busy picking up dishes on the line. They're too
100%.
busy, supporting that cook that they haven't had a chance to teach or train real well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. The vicious cycle.
I think one of the things that I posted on LinkedIn about recently was, how can you expect to promote people when your job looks like hell?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I experienced this a few years back. It's like, hey, you're an amazing cook. You are a natural leader. Do you want to be a sous chef? No. What do you mean? Like, it's a raise. Yeah, but they look miserable.
Yep.
I'm like, oh. And I couldn't get a sous chef. I couldn't promote a sous chef to save my life.
Yeah.
Like if that was going to be the thing that was going to keep me from dying, I would have been dead.
100%. And the first, I did a podcast episode on this, but the first 90 days is absolutely crucial for anybody coming into a restaurant in any position. And if those first 90 days are rocky, then you're done. That person's not going to stick around. Why would they? It's totally chaos, total chaos. So,
how about this? Have you got any advice for those, since we're talking about sort of that in between space of employees to managers? You got any like bedrock advice for the employee that wants to get into management? Like that, or that young manager that's trying to continue to move up? Because I always thought that was the hardest part of my career.
Mm-hmm. Trying to move up.
Yeah, like you want to get to the next level, but and so often they want to go fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
But got any advice for those folks?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask you what made it so difficult for you to move up?
Everybody wanted me to have. Everybody wants to be able to know going into that role that you can do it. But if you haven't had it's that whole catch-22. It's getting the job without the experience, but you can't get the experience if you can't get the job.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. What was interesting was when somebody, so if for any employer or any manager that wants to move up the ranks, the first thing I would say is go talk to your manager and make your expectations known, right? Because they can't read your mind. We just talked about that early on, right?
Yeah.
You've got to advocate for yourself because it's a very important leadership trait. You've also got to go after what you want. If you're going to sit around and hope that somebody notices you, again, like just keep in mind, everybody's really busy. They've got a lot of things to manage. So get your foot out there, get your voice out there, work on your confidence, and let the management team know what you're looking for. From the management side, what I've had a lot of success with is when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to move up, we're like, amazing. Let's sit down. Let's have a conversation about where you're at, where your performance is right now. Let's make sure that you've met all the expectations for your current role. So we'd pull out the job description. We'd go through it together, how you feel like you're doing here. Okay, let's see if you can work on X, if there's opportunities. And then we'd say, we're going to give you 30 days or whatever it is to work on this. Let's circle back. That shows us that they're committed to actually putting in the work, right? If they accomplish that and growth and development was starting to happen, because we know that's how leadership works, right? Especially in restaurants, they'd come back to us. We'd sit down and say, great, we're going to write a development plan for you. And we would start to teach them more and more and more about running the restaurant. Maybe that role included cross-training in different areas of the restaurant. If they were front of house, spending some time in the heart of house and vice versa. We would have line cooks come out and spend a day at the host stand. It was awesome. We had, or come out and shadow a server, right? Like understanding what it really fully takes, or shadow a manager too, understanding what it fully takes to run the restaurant from a big picture perspective. And then we'd start writing in different things. We'd say, okay, if you're not a trainer, you're going to be a trainer first, set you up in a leadership position. If you've already been a trainer and you're ready to take on some management roles, we're going to teach you how to write a schedule. We're going to teach you how to do inventory, right? And we wouldn't give them those responsibilities, but we would start just training them on that again to see if they were excited about the job, if they understood the concepts, if it was something that they were really curious about. And I would say, I don't know what percentage I'd put to this, maybe 50% of the time, we'd write a development plan and say, here's what your next 90 days are going to look like. You're going to shadow a manager, you're going to take inventory, you're going to write a schedule, you're going to do beverage ordering, you're going to do food ordering, whatever it is.
Right.
50% of them would say, I don't want to do all this. And so they'd back out of even the opportunity to move up.
Right.
The other half were all in.
Yep.
And at the end of the 90 days, we were like, great, this is the person that's proving to us that they are ready to take the next step. And so I think once you lay out a really clear path of this is what development looks like, and here are all the things that you're going to need to learn, that really shows people, it calls their bluff a little bit, right? Like,
yeah,
they're like, oh, this is what management looks like. Okay, this is a lot more than I think, because I think a lot of people, especially you, I'm sure you've encountered this, right? People buy restaurants or open restaurants because they have money and they've never spent a day in the restaurant world before, and they think it's fun and it's easy and it's a party. Right?
Well, I can invite all my friends over.
100%. And then they realize all the things that goes into it. And so it's the exact same for anybody that wants to move up. They really need to fully understand what the big picture looks like. And you can talk about that, but until, again, you set the expectations and actually show them what a day in the life looks like or a week in the life, they don't fully understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I find that like young, not even young, but just fresh. I've been using the term fresh because like there's a lot of folks who've changed careers and whatever, but they get to a place where they want their first sous chef position. And I was talking to a guy and he says, my goal, he's like, I'm going to be a sous chef by the end of the year. I'm like, great. He goes, they know that. He says, so my goal is really to be the best cook in the kitchen. And I said, honestly, I'd like to challenge that notion. And he's like, well, okay. And I said, what if you aim to be like the third best cook in the kitchen and aim to be the best teacher? He's like, okay. I said, because if you can teach people how things are supposed to be done and why they're supposed to be done that way, and you could be the best teacher in the kitchen, your influence is going to expand like exponentially so that when the time comes, you're ready, right? Like you actually are going to be able to kind of be that conduit because the chef's going to say, teach them how to do this. Teach this how to do that. I said, and you're already going to be there. He's like, nobody's really ever said that to me. I'm like, well, perhaps I'm a little different in the world, but that's my take on it is like, expand your influence. If you want to be a leader, expand your influence.
100%. I mean, when I was a GM or regional, I was never the best bartender. I was never the best person at the door. I was never the best, right? Like I would do everything I could to be really knowledgeable about those areas, but I didn't have the practice or the muscle memory like the teams did, right? And it's the same thing for chefs. Like, I doubt that they're the best at every single station, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've worked with a couple of guys who nobody could outcook them, right? Like nobody could outwork them, Yeah. I was proud of the fact that for a while, nobody could outwork me. Like, and now my right hip doesn't thank me for that. So
yeah, it's not the most important thing, right?
No,
we're all competitive in this
sometimes
business.
Sometimes it takes life to teach you that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you're such a great teacher though. When you came on my show and I just really got an inside look at how much you care about your teams and your coaching style and your teaching style. Anybody's lucky to work with you. So
thank you. Gosh, I can't thank you enough for coming to play in my sandbox.
Heck yeah.
It's a pleasure to talk to somebody else who really understands. It definitely doesn't hurt that we have the same birthday.
Totally.
We're just kind of in the same groove. Yeah. So to find you, how do we find you? How does
Yeah.
someone who listens to this and says, I want to work with Kristin, how do we make that happen?
Totally. Well, I offer daily leadership tips on LinkedIn. So you can find me at LinkedIn at Kristin Marvin. And my first name is spelled Christin. I write a weekly newsletter on my website for weekly leadership lessons as well, which is at kristinmarvin.com. I've got a podcast called the No Hesitations Restaurant Leadership Podcast that you can find anywhere you listen to shows. And then if you want to work with me, you can call me or text me at 719-494-6074 or shoot me an email at kristinlmarvin@gmail.com.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much. And to all you out there, please keep listening and checking it out, because every week the number gets just a little bit bigger, and I appreciate it. So have a great one.